each of these proverbs sort of, you can just kind of take it on its own, but they all do work kind of together to give us another kind of an overall picture as well. But a lot of different thoughts here put together. So let's open with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for each of your people here and your word, Lord. And I ask that as we read this, we would understand it clearly, Lord. I pray that you'd help us to walk in your truth, and I pray that you'd help us to see ourselves the way we should. Help each of us to look in at our heart and make it right with you and with others. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, chapter 25, verse 11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Like an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold is a wise rebuke to an obedient ear. Like the colds of snow in time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. Whoever falsely boasts of giving is like a cloud and wind without rain. By long forbearance a ruler is persuaded, and a gentle tongue breaks a bone. Have you found honey? Eat only as much as you need, lest you be filled with it and vomit. Seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, lest he become weary of you and hate you. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. Like one who takes away a garment in cold weather, and like vinegar on soda is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink, for so you will heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will reward you. The north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue, and angry countenance. It is better to dwell in a corner of a housetop than to share a house with a contentious woman. As cold water to a weary soul, so is good news from a far country. A righteous man who falters before the wicked is like a murky spring in a polluted well. It is not good to eat much honey, so to seek one's own glory is not glory. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. Okay, so like I said, you see a lot of Proverbs, they kind of, each one is kind of like a statement that kind of, it's a generalized truth that we observe about reality. In this case, mostly relationships with people, and what brings about joy and sadness and sorrow and all kinds of things here. But let's just take each one as it's spoken. The first one says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. What is a word fitly spoken? Does someone have a different translation that puts that differently, or? What do you think of? Why would it say a word fitly spoken? Okay, yeah. It fits. That's what the word that fits. It's like, this is the right place to say the right thing. And sometimes you have the right thing to say, but it's not the right time, right? Doesn't fit. And sometimes it's the right time, but you don't have the right words to say. Maybe you're not ready or something. And, I think it's a wise person that waits for the right time and the right words so that they fit. Can you relate? Have you ever done it wrong? I've done it wrong. Had other people do it wrong too. But when it doesn't fit, you kind of just know, that didn't really fit. But a word fitly spoken is beautiful. I think that's the apples of gold and settings of silver. It's beautiful. It's like, wow, that was what I needed to hear. That is very helpful. That was the right time and the right place. Can you think of a time when someone spoke a few words to you that were like that? They were beautiful. It was the right time, it was the right place, and it was very encouraging or helpful. Maybe it was even a rebuke, but it was at the right time, and it was at the right place, and it was helpful. Where does that come from? Fitting word. From the Holy Spirit? Yeah. yeah, I think that we need to seek God in this. Let's read Isaiah 50, verse 4. Listen, did you hear those words? The Lord has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season. When you speak the word, it's got to be from the Lord, in season, in the right time, in the right place. And that is from the Lord. I think that when you have experienced something like that, you recognize that God was in that, and God was giving that word to you. Look at verse 12. It is related. It's like earring of gold, an ornament of fine gold. Again, it's just a picture of something beautiful. Is a wise rebuke to obedient ear. So can a fitting word be a rebuke? Yeah, it says is a wise rebuke to an obedient ear. You see, when there is a necessary rebuke, when there is a necessary correction, there needs to be two parts to it for it to be productive, right? A wise rebuker, the one who's giving the correction, needs to be wise. In the right time, in the right place, and the right words, and an obedient ear. The person who hears needs to be willing to receive that, right? And then it's productive. Either one of those things, if they're missing, it becomes unproductive. And some of those things we just can't control, right? But some of them we can. But the proverb is just making a statement. It's a beautiful thing when this falls together, right? And the statement is, it is a beautiful thing. I was thinking of, when you have a child, most of you adults have had children or been around children, and they need correction daily, right? Children just do. They do things wrong. And we all do, but children need that very obviously on simple things. And when they receive that well, and you see them turn and go the right way, do the right thing, it's a great feeling, isn't it? Look, they just learned a lesson here, And as a parent, you're like, wow, that's great, And it's a beautiful thing. You see, they received that correction rather than, you can tell when the attitude's wrong, right? It's like, yeah, they received it, but it didn't get to their heart. Do you know what I'm talking about? And they're like, still defiant or still trying to do it wrong, do things wrong. And it's a small example. It's also true in the church and with grown people, when people can give and receive correction in the right way. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's a rare thing. Honestly, we're all proud, aren't we? And we want to correct in the wrong way, and we don't want to receive correction. And that's difficult because it isn't a beautiful thing when it's done that way. Let's read some scriptures about that. Titus 2, verse 6 through 8, and then 1 Timothy 5, 1 through 2. Okay, so it does say to exhort the young men, to encourage the young, those that are less mature in the faith, to sober-mindedness and these other things. Those that are told these things, whether it's me or you or whatever, we should be receptive to those corrections. And then 1 Timothy 5, 1 and 2.
Rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as father, and younger men, but
Okay, so we see some guidelines. There is to be respect for our elders. There's to be respect for those in authority. We should treat them with respect, and between the opposite sexes, we need to treat that relationship with all purity. It means that we need to be respectful of distance and things like that. With when men and women are talking, and maybe even it needs to be sensitive to those things with all purity. Don't leave any room for someone to suspect, flirtatious behavior and things like that, which aren't fitting for believers. It goes with the elderly and the younger, and they should be respectful. And then also Galatians 6, verses 1 and 2. Is that Galatians 6? That's okay. That's a good example of respect, though. It fits. Okay, so we see that we're to approach one another, even if someone is caught up in a trespass or sin, with gentleness, spirit of gentleness, not with a condescending, arrogant attitude that's like, looking down your nose and pointing your finger, but with gentleness and addressing that thing. Not to be ignored, but to be... and it just goes along with what he's saying here. When it's given and received in the right way, the right time, it's beautiful. The next verse is like the cold of snow in the time of harvest, the faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his master. I'm not really sure why a cold snow in the time of harvest is refreshing, other than if it was just a little bit of snow when you're working and it's really hot. I can get that. But it seems like if you're trying to harvest and a bunch of snow fell on you, it would be not a good thing. But I think in this context, it must have been just like you're working really hard and like a cloud comes over and gives you some refreshment. And you're like, that's really nice. I can understand that. And what is really nice? What does it say is really nice there? A faithful messenger, yeah. I was trying to think about a faithful messenger. What do you think that means? In our day and age, we have instant communications with almost anyone in the world, right? We can just text somebody on the other side of the world, and they get the message, right? And but think about back then, if you wanted to get a message to someone, even in the next town, you had to, say, you're busy working here, and there's a runner, so that's how they did it. There's a young man who could go fast, and he's like, could you give this message? This is an important message. I need to get this to the next town. Maybe someone's wife is having a baby, and they're working over here, something like that. And I could tell you a story about that, but I won't. Anyway, if you have a faithful messenger who gets the message across there on time, and that's a very important thing, isn't it? And you can see how that would be. Does this still apply to us today? When we can just send a message on a phone real quick. Does the compliment go to our phone? It says, a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. The one that you send and gives the right message. I was thinking about this in this context. What is the message that God has given us to send to give to the world? The gospel, yeah, the good news of our salvation. And if we're faithful messengers, then it refreshes God. You think? God is blessed when we're faithful with the message that he's given for us to share with the world. Let's read Matthew 28, verse 18 through 20. Okay. Matthew 28 verses 18 through 20 was, yeah, it's a different one you have, but that's okay. We'll read it later. But Jesus, of course, Jesus was going back to heaven, and he left the command to his disciples, and I think to us as disciples of Jesus, um, that we baptize. I'll read it again. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. That's our calling to him. That's the message that we have to give, to make disciples, to share the good news of our salvation and make disciples. Last night we heard a missionary at another church and he's going to be actually at tonight. If you wanted to go and hear him, he's from India, and you were there, right? Yeah. He's going to be in Anchorage tonight at 6:30 at the Alliance Church in Anchorage, and it was a really encouraging message that he gave, because they're doing this. They're making disciples all over India, even while there's terrible persecution and from Hindu groups that are. But it's an amazing work that's going on there in the spread of the gospel. But it says there, it's a refreshing thing when there's a faithful messenger to those who send him. We're to be messengers of God, right? And that's refreshing to the Lord, that when we're faithful, when we're obedient to him. Verse 14 says, whoever falsely boasts of giving is like clouds and wind without rain. Falsely boasts of giving. What does that mean? Yeah, not keeping your promises. Have you ever been disappointed by someone who talks but never delivers? Talks about doing it but never follows through. Yeah, what does it say about that? It's like clouds and wind without rain. It's like if you're there in a dry land and you really need that rain just to survive, because your crops will fail, and then you look up and there's wind and there's clouds, but it never ever comes down. That's what it is like. Someone's disappointed because someone's boasting about all they're going to do but never do it. That can be big or little things, can't it? And sometimes it's just telling a child, well, I'll take you up here or do something, and then later on oh no, I forgot. Have you ever had that happen? I forgot. I told him I was going to do that. Oh no, I forgot. I got busy with something else. And then, what do we do then? I better go back and make sure I make that right. But yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities to talk and not follow through with it. Verse 14 says, no, that was verse 14. Verse 15, by long forbearance a ruler is persuaded, and a gentle tongue breaks a bone. Okay, so that first part of that, by long forbearance a ruler is persuaded. I don't know. What do you think that's talking about? What parable is that? Okay, when persistence to the unjust judge, and yeah. Does anything get done in the government very quickly? No, I guess it didn't back then either. Like you gotta be persistent with a ruler to get anything done. Yeah, I guess it takes persistence there. But a gentle tongue breaks a bone. What's the contrast there? What does that have to do with the first part of that statement? Does gentleness seem powerful? No, gentleness seems weak, right? Is it powerful? Meekness doesn't seem to get anything done. Meekness, gentleness, right? Meekness and gentleness seem like, oh, that's not how you get things done in this world. But you know what? A lot of valuable things get done by people who are gentle and meek. And they can approach the situation with humility. And go ahead.
The first phrase, I think, is a lot like a mom who keeps praying for the child. Keeps praying and keeps praying.
Right. The ruler being God. Yeah. Yeah. Not that God doesn't want to answer the prayer.
The attitude that she does.
Yeah.
That's, long prepared. She's waiting and waiting and waiting. Keeping on asking.
Yeah, let's read Matthew 5, verse 5. That is so opposite. Everything in the Beatitudes is opposite of what you would expect in this world, what you might have experienced. When Jesus says, "But the meek will inherit the earth." What do you see in this world? Who's getting all the earth? Who's getting all the goods? Not the meek, right? That's not how you go about it in this world. But Jesus says that is how you go about it in the kingdom of God. The meek shall inherit the earth. God sees not the person who's out there conquering with power, but the person who's out there meekly serving and doing the work and being faithful. And I it's a powerful thing. It breaks a bone. It gets the job done. I think that the only reason he sees that breaks the bone is just showing not the destructive nature of a gentle tongue, but the power of it. Because a bone is the strongest thing, and that's what holds you together. And there's a power there in just being gentle. 16 says, "Have you found honey? Eat only as much as you need, lest you be filled with it and vomit." Well, that's practical advice, isn't it? Have you ever ate too much honey? One time I went to this friend's house, and they asked me if I wanted a cup of tea. I said, sure. And she made a cup of tea, and I think half the mug was filled with honey. That was so sweet. It was hard to get down. I was like, wow, that's like just drinking hot honey. It's kind of good at first, but got to be kind of powerful. What do you think this is talking about? Is it just honey? Have you ever been on a vacation that was too long? I know you've probably been on one that was too short, but I have, where you're just like, okay, enough sitting around, enough relaxing, enough, good things are good because you don't do it all the time, right? I mean, resting is good, but you want to rest all the time, right? Honey is good, but not too much. Have you ever had a meal that was too big? It was so good, you're like, wow, this is great, and then pretty soon you're like, oh, and you're suffer for it, right? Because it was so good. Entertainment loses its appeal, doesn't it? You can be entertained only so long, and then it's like, I'm ready to do something productive. I don't want to just be sitting around entertained so long. There's all kinds of things like that in this world. It's a good thing. I remember as a child, you don't understand that. I mean, you just don't understand that. And I've been thinking, you have this great presents at Christmas or something exciting. It's like, why don't we do this every day? This would be so fun. Why don't we just do this every day? Why don't we have a birthday party every day? Well, there's a reason. It's just, once in a while because it's special. Something that's special. We don't just party all the time. It isn't, but sometimes it's good to get together and enjoy fellowship and, good food and things like that. The Bible, in the Old Testament, there's lots of feast days that are prescribed that they enjoy these times, but it's not all the time, right? It needs to be taken in moderation. Honey, just have a little bit, so it stays good. We need to understand moderation in our lifestyle. Verse 17, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house lest he become weary of you and hate you. Now these aren't absolute truths like, oh no, how many times am I supposed to step foot in there before he hates me? We don't know. It's just something to think about, right? It's good to know when to go home, right? Go home before, when they still want you there, right? I mean, I can't think of, very often when someone stayed too long, but I enjoy, visitors and things like that. But we need to think about things like this too. Seldom set foot in your neighbor's house. You don't want to be a pain to someone. You want to be a blessing to them. Just generalized, thoughts about about relationships with people. Verse 18 says, a man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. What do you do with a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow? What are those tools used for? What was that? Yeah. You kill, you destroy, you hurt, right? Does a lie damage? Does it kill, destroy, and hurt? Yeah. The same thing. When we tell lies about other people, we're damaging them. We're hurting them. When you hear somebody talking behind someone's back, and it's not good, what should we do with that? Just believe everything they say? Probably not. We probably should just ignore that, because it's probably not needed to be said. It should be out in the open. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. A false witness in court is, that's a serious offense, right? And God sees everything we say. Okay, verse 20, it says, like one who takes away a garment in cold weather, and like vinegar on soda is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. So, you can picture someone who's out there, standing out there in the cold, trying to stay warm, and this mean person just comes up and grabs their coat. Think of someone who's weak and someone who's strong, and someone's just, give me that coat, I'm cold. And this person's just standing there, shivering. Well, that's not very helpful, is it? And it compares that to singing songs? Isn't that a good thing to sing songs to a heavy heart? What's that talking about? You think it might be related to a word fitly spoken? There's a time and a place, right? And yeah, someone might need encouragement with a song. Or the right word. But there might be a time when it's just time to... Do you remember what Job's friends did? They did a lot of things wrong, but I think one thing they did right was they just sat with him for I can't remember, 3 days or something? 7 days, it was a long time. And they just mourned with him. And I think we've lost that a lot, just being in the presence of someone who's hurting and hurting with them, And I think a lot of times, I know I'm guilty of it, just trying, oh, come on, cheer up. It's not that bad. Trying to think of good things. And there's a place for that. But we got to be sensitive too and mourn with those who mourn. There's a time for just, someone has a loss, recognize the loss. Let's read Romans 12:15. It says to weep or mourn with those who weep. When someone's sad, sometimes you just need to, just be sad with them, and it might be the most helpful thing. Also, John 11:33 through 36. Someone have that? John 11:33 through 36. Could someone read it? I don't know if maybe I didn't hand it out. John 11:33 through 36. Jesus wept with those that wept. He saw their pain and their hurt. And, it's interesting because he knew what he was going to do. Why didn't he just come in and say, look, I'm going to raise him from the dead. You guys don't need to cry, But he went through the mourning with them. Why do you think he did that? You think maybe they needed it? Man of sorrows? Sometimes we need to weep. Sometimes we need to mourn. God knows that. He knew it with them. Sometimes the best thing for us is to be sad. we need to go through that a little bit. Yeah.
Let's think about that a little bit, because in our own experience, there's times when our heart is breaking, and we're crying out to him, and we know he's there and accompanying us the whole time, right up till the deliverance comes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just what you said, he's with us in whatever we're going through.
Yeah.
Sort of amazing to think of that.
And he's chosen that because that's the best way. God always chooses the best ways. And we think, oh, the best way would be to make me happy. But that's not what he does. And I was thinking of that, like with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they actually got thrown into that fiery furnace, They didn't know what was going to happen. They said they didn't know. They said, God can deliver us, but even if he doesn't, right? They didn't know what was going to happen. They actually went in. Now, they weren't burned up, and he came down and went in there with them. He went and suffered with them. I know you can say, well, yeah, that didn't hurt him, but part of the pain is just the thought, the hatred that you see in people's eyes as they're throwing you in there, right? I mean, that hurts in itself. Yeah, it's a deep thought we could spend a lot of time on, but yeah, okay, so what was the verse we were on? Is one to sing songs to a heavy heart. We need to be sensitive to people's hurt, and we need to spend the time that's needed in mourning. I don't think it means don't sing songs to someone who has a heavy heart. We can sometimes cheer people up with singing. I don't think this is like an absolute truth in that. Never do that. It's just we need to also know there's a time to weep, and weep with those who weep. Verse 21 and 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For so you will heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will reward you. How can we do good to people who cause us harm? Meet their needs? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look for a need and meet that need, I guess it says there. If he's hungry, give him bread, and if he's thirsty, give him drink. And the Lord will reward you. Now, the heaping coals of fire on his head, I'm not sure that should be necessarily a motivation. But let's read Matthew 5, 44 and 45. Who does that? Who does good to those who hurt him? God does, right? Jesus did that, obviously, when he was here. And we're acting like God when we do that. We are being like him. Hey, there's going to be a final day of judgment. But in the meantime, God is good to his enemies, to people who are enemies of God. He still gives them every breath they breathe and the life that they have. Verse 23, the north wind brings forth rain, the backbiting tongue, and angry countenance. What is backbiting? Does anyone have another translation of that? What do you think backbite? I don't use that word very often, but what do you think of? Yeah. Someone says something mean, you're immediately back at them, right? Back and forth, right? Backbiting. Quick to disagree. looking for fault, demeaning, disagreeable. So what does it do? What does it say it does? Verse 23. Yeah, it makes people mad. It makes people mad when you're just, as soon as someone says something, you just come right back at them with a disagreement or a demeaning comment, something like that. It just makes people mad. The thing about that, when maybe somebody says something that's not quite right. Do we need to just be like correcting them all the time? I mean, it isn't necessary. Sometimes it's better to just listen, try and understand what they're actually saying than to be constantly correcting and making backbiting. If someone says something mean to you, just send it right back to them. It doesn't bring peace. Verse 24 says similarly about, I think, a marital relationship. It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. What is contention? I think it's a lot like backbiting, but what do you think of when you hear contention? Yeah, just arguing about things all the time. And this particularly is talking about a woman, and I was thinking about how powerful women are. They really are. I'm not. Men and women are different, okay? And women have power in a home to make it a happy place or not. And she can just make this place wonderful or not, depending on her mood, right? Just depending on the attitude that is in that place. And it just says it's better to just live in the corner of the roof than to share that when that attitude is there that just brings this kind of like this dark over the place. I don't know. That's something to think about. I guess we men can do it too. There is a power there though that women have in particular. I'm just reading this and saying, what is he talking about? And I'm like, yeah, there is. They're powerful. They can make us happy or not as men. Maybe you've experienced that. Her spirit, joy, peace, kindness, those things God has given, I think particularly women, ability to just bring peace to situations that is like, and on the other hand, contention, it can make it a very unhappy place. I don't know. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do. I'm just saying this is what happens sometimes. Verse 25 says, as cold water to a weary soul is good news from a far country. I thought about that as we were hearing about India. There was bad news in that there's a lot of persecution there, but there's good news that the gospel's being spread around the country. And it's a faraway place. And you think, well, why is that good news? It doesn't affect me. But it does affect me because it does affect all of us. Those are people who are going to be in the kingdom that we're going to meet that wouldn't be there if this wasn't happening. And you hear that good news. I like to hear it. I really enjoy hearing missionaries. Do you guys like to go and hear missionaries speak of what's going on in other places? Why? Why do we like to hear that? Because it's good news from a far country, right? And what does it say that's like? Cold water and a weary soul. And I can relate to that. I hope you can too as you hear of God's work in the world. Verse 26 says, a righteous man who falters before the wicked is like a murky spring in a polluted well. So here you have a righteous man, someone who's lived his life well, but a wicked man comes and he falls. He falters. What does it say that does to the water? He's relating it to water. Think about water. You have a clear glass of water here, right? And a tiny little bit of, I'll say milk, right? You put a couple drops of milk in that water. Is that nice looking water anymore? No, now it's all cloudy or mud or whatever, right? Now it's 99.99% water, clear water, but it doesn't look good anymore, right? How many men have gone and done 10,000 good things and resisted 10,000 temptations in their life, and then they fall with one? What are they remembered for? We've got to remember that, don't we? I think especially as men, because you're going to be remembered for that one thing you did wrong. and you can stand on your rooftop and proclaim, but what about all this good stuff I did? And everybody's like, we know. It's the way it is, isn't it? It makes clear water cloudy, and then everybody questions. Yeah. Yeah, hey, it's the truth. A righteous man who falters before the wicked is like a murky spring and a polluted well. You get a bad reputation. You get that it's not clear anymore. Verse 27 was a lot like that other verse we read. It is not good to eat much honey, so to seek one's own glory is not glory. It's using honey again, but it's kind of a different context because it's talking about seeking glory. If you're really good at something, do you need to tell everyone? No, you don't. People will know, right? If you're telling everybody how good you are at something, why do you think you're doing it, you know? I don't know. You know, we don't need to seek our own glory. It's not glory. It's boasting. And I think most of the time people can see through it. Verse 28, the last verse, whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. In those days, of course, cities had walls around them to protect them. And a city with no walls, I mean, you could even take it literally of every wall in the place. What good is, just say a house, what good is a house with no walls? You know, it doesn't give you protection from the outside and everything. It's no good, right? A city with no walls gives you no protection. So what is that talking about? Whoever has no rule over his own spirit. What's he talking about? Self-control, yeah. And our spirit is not just our actions, but even our spirit, our emotions. You know, the things that may not be actions, but the attitude that we have. Can you see a bad attitude? You know, can you say, oh, that guy's got a bad attitude? You know, or maybe you can see it in yourself. It's like, I got a bad attitude today. I need some help. Yeah, we get bad attitudes sometimes, don't we? But it says we should have control over our spirit. If we have a bad attitude, we're going to ask God to give us control over that and to keep that under control so that it doesn't affect everyone around us. Well, this took longer than I thought. Wow, we're kind of getting away from us at the time. Okay, I'll try and quickly go through the questions. There's a couple more verses to read. What steps should we take to make sure that our words are fitly spoken? It's easy to say things that are wrong, the wrong time, in the wrong place. We talked about that. What fitly spoken means the right time, the right place for the right word. Let's read Colossians 4, verses 2 through 4. Can someone read that quickly? Then verse 4 also. Okay, so we see the heart of Paul there as he's speaking is that he be able to speak as he ought, meaning a word fitly spoken in the right time, in the right place. Question 2 said, how does being faithful in keeping our promises help us, and how does it help in our relationships with others? That was, of course, from verse 14. It says, whoever falsely boasts of giving is like a cloud and wind without rain. Will people trust you if you don't keep your word? No. I mean, eventually people are not going to trust you anymore. If people don't trust you, you'll lose relationships that are very important and valuable. So we see that trust is earned by keeping our word. Question 3 says, how can we be more faithful in our relationships with our families and with other believers and with God? I think it starts with the last one. Being faithful to God is where we start, and that will affect our relationships with other believers and our family. And then I'm going quickly, but we don't have any more time. How does being kind to our enemies help them, and how does it help us? If you take the verse literally, what does it do for them? It says, puts burning coals on their head. How does that help them? How can burning coals be helpful to someone? Yeah. But the way the burning coals are applied is by kindness. right? So don't take that wrong. The burning coals may wake them up, and that wake them up to what is right and wrong, but we do that by kindness. And last question says, how can believers restrain their spirits? And how do verse 21, 22, 27, and 28 teach us self-restraint? Okay, verse 21, restrain our desire for revenge, replacing that with kindness. Verse 22, to trust in God to be the rewarder, not looking for reward for ourselves. Verse 23 or 27 is the restrain ourselves from puffing up ourselves and our achievement and accomplishments. And verse 28 is to control those emotions that end up hurting us and those around us. Sadness, grief, anger, even joy need to be in the proper place and context, not thinking of ourselves, but also those around us. If you're sad, do we need to just let everybody know? No, maybe sometimes, but not all the time. Sometimes we need to just not spread the sadness. And if we're happy, may there be a situation where we're not to be all that happy on the outside. There might be some people that need to actually have us weep with them and to kind of hurt with them. We need to be thinking of others, not just how we feel. We don't need to just express our own feelings all the time. We need to be thinking of the people around us as well in the context of selflessness, thinking of others, not just ourselves. I just wanted to close by thinking of overall, all these things, there's so many different things here, so many different truths. And how do you sum this all up or bring this all together? Well, I just want to say that, a lot of this is just having right relationships with people. A good friend, a good relationship with someone is really a gift from God. You think about that. Having someone that we can trust and that we love. And where do we get that? We don't get it by searching for it. We get that by being one. I think often in our flesh, we want to find a good friend so we can have one for ourselves, right? But that's not the way it works. I think these scriptures are pretty instructive in how to be a good friend, not find a good friend. And when you learn to be a good friend, all of a sudden you'll find them. It's true in our family too. We have relationships in our family that we may not like how it's going or something, and instead of, sometimes that's complicated, I know, but I think that these scriptures here give us a lot of overall wisdom in how to make those relationships right. And most of it needs to be us in our hearts getting things right with God. Okay, let's see, who wants to close in prayer? Stephen, could you close for us, please?
Admonitions, Lord, the kind reminders of how to be like you. Lord, because in all these things we see a picture of the Lord Jesus and the way he acted, the way he demonstrated his